Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Don McCuniff. I'm a director in Baird's Technology and Services Group. I cover the human capital management sector alongside my colleagues Brett Schock and Andy Lividaro here in the United States, as well as Seb Daimler, Simon Pearson, and Helen Jones in Europe. Before we get started, I wanted to first level set on what we at Baird view as the three core verticals within HCM. That's talent acquisition, talent management, and workforce administration. Within these three core verticals, Baird has extensive expertise across all the models from services to tech-enabled services and software. And while our team has been covering the sector for over 30 years, we are looking forward to its continued and participating in its continued evolution. So with that said, we're super excited to host this webinar today and dive into a topic that is front of mind for many of our clients, that is how AI will impact the human capital sector. Now, I know this is a very complex topic with far-reaching considerations and implications, but we are privileged to be joined by our panel of experts to help shed some light on where it's headed. I'm pleased to introduce Steve Kurtz, HR Transformation Service Leader at Ernst & Young, Jamaal Justice, also from Ernst & Young People Advisory Services Practice with a specific focus on AI applications in HR, and Dr. Yves-Alexandre de Montjoye, AI Thought Leader and Associate Professor from the Imperial College of London. Each of these panelists have a very unique perspective based on the work they do in and around the intersection of AI and HCM. So firstly, gentlemen, on behalf of Baird, thank you for joining us. We're very fortunate to have you here with us today. And with that, let's jump right in. So Yves, let me start with you to set the stage generally around AI. Can you give us just a high-level overview of where we are relative to the last 2 years in AI advancement?
No, more than happy to. Mostly, I think in the past couple of years, we've been going through kind of two AI revolutions. The first one is basically the deep learning revolution. It's how the availability of data and computing power means that models, machine learning models, AI models, have now been able to basically learn directly from raw data across data modalities, text, images, tabular data, etc. And that has really led to dramatic improvement in their capabilities, their prediction capabilities, because now model can basically learn directly from raw unlabeled data and have been able to basically transfer knowledge from one task to the other. And that had quite a dramatic impact on the AI field, but also how AI was useful across businesses, including in human capital management. And then the second revolution is basically what we've seen in the last year or two was generative AI, right? And basically AI so far was mostly focusing on prediction models, right? Given a picture, data about a person, can you make a prediction, right? Is this a picture of a cat or does this email looks like spam? But now models can go beyond prediction and actually generate content. We've all used, ChatGPT, but GenAI goes way beyond just text. Right now, models are able to generate images, audio, video, synthetic data, and that is a dramatic changes in how models are built and what they can be useful for. I think when we wrote the report with Baird on an AI state of mind, we mostly emphasized kind of three ways AI is impacting businesses. The first one is basically new insights, prediction, the ability to forecast things. The second one is basically the automation of tasks, right? Efficiency gain, the ability to automate a number of tasks to go faster and cheaper. And then finally, the last one are basically new product, new services that before AI would basically not have been possible. And I think throughout this webinar, I think we're going to come back to both, what deep learning and GenAI enable and the way it is impacting businesses, and in particular in human capital management. We're going to talk about a range of applications. On the automation front, right, there's obvious one on customer services, answering FAQs, handling routine queries, on HR, on matching CV, for example, to job adverts, scheduling interviews, writing adverts. All of them are dramatically improving productivity and freeing up human talent. And on the new insight front, we'll be talking more about consumer analytics, helping to create personalized marketing strategies, improving consumer experience, but also risk management and how AI can help better again forecast, predict, and anticipate potential issues.
Thanks, Yves. And just coming off of your overview of where the technology lands so far, the one thing that I really want to make clear for our audience viewing today is, regardless of whether you're a services organization or a technology organization, or even if you use technology to deliver services through it, there's a little bit of everything for you in what we're going to cover today. A lot of the examples, Yves, that you covered around automation of routine tasks or generating new content or becoming predictive in nature using the advancements of AI and generative AI. We just really want to make sure that you're able to take that and understand that irrespective of how you deliver to your clients, there's a lot of opportunity for you here today.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Steve and Yves. Certainly a wonderful backdrop to what is an otherwise extremely complex environment. So we've boiled that down probably too far, but it's a great backdrop to what maybe I pass it over to Steve and Jamaal at this point. And guys, that Yves touched on some pretty incredible developments and functionality that AI is going to bring to the table. But from your seat, maybe talk to us about what you're hearing from your clients. On our end, we're hearing kind of an increasing volume of both excitement and concern over the potential impacts that AI will have on their businesses or portfolio companies. But I'm curious, maybe specific to the HCM sector, why should operators or investors in the HCM space really focus on deploying AI within their organizations? And then maybe give us some discrete examples of where you're seeing AI have called the greatest impact within your work.
Absolutely, Don, and I'll take this one first. And thank you, Yves. I think we heard a tremendous story from Yves about the evolution of this tech. The two other things I might add there is that AI and generative AI even is becoming increasingly democratized. So it's in individuals' hands to use, and they're using it. Sometimes regardless of what the enterprise's approach is around AI and whether or not it's desirable to use it. So it's out there. The other thing I'll mention is that there's a tremendous amount of funding that we've seen come into this space as organizations are eager to experiment because of the opportunity ahead of them to realize true business value from investments in this space. So why is this important to us in this space? One is that opportunity, whether it be operational efficiency, whether it be experience, whether it be cost effectiveness, whether it be improved customer and employee insights. There's tremendous opportunity, real business value opportunity ahead of us. Two, competitive considerations. So whether you choose to go on this journey or you don't choose to go on this journey, there's an impact. And companies that are able to leverage AI effectively to improve their services, products, or operations are going to have an opportunity to be at a significant advantage from those who don't. The third one I'll mention is around risk. So there are ways to do this right, and there are ways to definitely not do this right. And we've seen several examples in the news around companies who've made missteps in this space. So it's important to really approach this space thoughtfully, consider data privacy considerations, regulatory compliance, a variety of those considerations as we go into this space. So yes, it's important to get into the space, but to do so with intention, responsibly. And then if I talk about impact, we're seeing product companies innovating their tool sets to capitalize on AI opportunities. We're seeing services companies innovating how services are delivered, looking at people, process, tech, risk considerations. And as we're seeing these evolutions, we're recognizing the tremendous positive and disruptive potential of this technology, which means there's implications for how we manage change. There's workforce planning implications. There's implications for how we upskill, reskill, and think about our talent. as generative AI becomes increasingly more integrated into our work. So let me just give a few examples of applied into the HCM space by digging into some domain areas. So when it comes to recruiting, AI and intelligent automation can be applied to automating monotonous tasks such as screening resumes and scheduling interviews. It can generate insights to predict hiring trends and anticipate staffing needs, and enabling companies to provide strategic value beyond the transactional aspects of recruitment. It can help by putting together comprehensive job descriptions, role requirements, and expected responsibilities. And it can also help us to remove language that reflects our unconscious bias, things that are beyond our understanding that we may put into these artifacts. And in so doing, help us to be more effective at recruiting a diverse set of talent and avoiding the risks associated with doing that inappropriately. Machine learning algorithms can learn from existing data to predict future outcomes, such as which candidate is most likely to succeed as well. So it's just a few examples in recruiting. From a talent management perspective, a major factor is AI's capacity for personalization. So AI can offer a customized employee experience by tailoring learning and development programs, benefits plans, and even communication styles. And this high degree of personalization has a direct positive impact on employee satisfaction and retention, and therefore downstream from that, the bottom line. It also has the capability to match talent with required roles, optimizing talent allocation throughout the organization. So just a few examples in talent management. In workforce management, AI can also be leveraged to automate routine workforce management tasks, including timesheet management, leave tracking, benefits administration, compliance reporting. It can analyze varied data sets and help to generate predictive models to aid in smarter and quicker workforce planning. And what I'm getting really excited about is the opportunity around skills. So identifying and inferring skills from various information that we can provide to it, like resumes or LinkedIn pages or a variety of individual specific information. Look at that broadly across the workforce and beyond a single organization to identify trending skills, and then to help to anticipate the needs of the workforce in the future and how we can upskill, reskill, hire, et cetera, to close gaps and get ahead of those downstream needs. And then I'll mention a sort of in the payroll processing space, the ability to automate data entry tasks to predict payroll costs, help identify and surface anomalies or errors. And then in PEO services, analyzing vast quantities of data related to benefits administration, regulatory compliance, and risk management, and helping to make those insights more digestible to professionals supporting these processes to better and advise and support end clients. So in sum, AI done right can help us to do many things that we do today more effectively and efficiently. And as Yves so aptly pointed out, make things that were previously not possible or too costly to do possible. It can enhance the experience of employees working with technology and ultimately drive towards better overall business performance and financial outcomes. And that's why we should pay considerable attention to this space.
Thanks, Jamaal. And just to add a little bit onto that as well, and I'm going back to my previous point, but I want to go a little bit deeper into it around generative AI. It's not just transforming day-to-day or business as usual activities, but it really is. It's reshaping the role of HR as a strategic partner in the organization. And so whether, again, you're a services organization or you're more on the technology product side, if we think about kind of the value spectrum of activities, what we're finding a lot of generative AI doing is allowing us to be able to almost outsource or utilize generative AI for more of the low value tasks in order to focus our people, our workforce, or our products on more of the higher value tasks that move the needle in the function. And so when we go back to some of the points made about it being proactive, being able to predict and being able to personalize, it's very powerful. And we'll get into a few examples here as we continue on through.
Yeah, that's a great point, Steve and Jamaal. You touched on some very impactful, discrete examples there. You certainly have seen our clients across PEO and RPO starting to deploy those same models. Like the one that struck me the most, notwithstanding the process automation functionality, but the fact that there are PEO models out there that are taking in AI and bringing it into a sales motion. And that program, that software is able to effectively predict what topics or the way in which topics are delivered will actually correlate to better close rates. So just the broad application is really stunning here, but appreciate the color. You're kind of the same vein, and Steve, maybe turn this over to you. Just given your team's ongoing work, again, some discrete examples, but maybe not exactly with how it's being used within HCM, but where you see the most effort being exerted. Jamaal covered a lot of examples of how it can and will be applied, but practically day to day today, how do you see your clients and where do you see them focusing the most attention today?
Yeah, absolutely. A few examples from our standpoint. Number one, and Yves and Jamaal had mentioned this previously, but the ability to personalize content. We're seeing that really take hold from a learning and development standpoint. And so when we think about the personalization aspect and also the ability to digest information on an individual, and we think about the linkage between what skills they possess, the career trajectory or the track that they're on, and being able to pair that with a lot of the great learning technology in the space, what we're seeing, what we're working on as a firm and what others are working on is accelerating the personalization of that content. And so from a learning standpoint, a couple ways that I see that play in, we're seeing generative AI taking a strong stance and a strong model and actually helping develop that content. We're also seeing it from a matching standpoint. When we think about, again, the skills and the learning required to guide an individual on their career path, a lot of the developments that we're seeing in these tools are around the personalization, around the matchmaking or the marriage between that content and the individual. And really what we're trying to do, and just collectively the we as a group, is because we have such a recent focus in the trajectory and advancements in and around AI, we're going after high impact learning experiences. And thanks to generative AI, what used to be almost on an individual basis, we're now able to do it at scale. And scale is a really important thing to talk about with respect to generative AI, because that's really what's unleashing our power to be able to do it. In addition to learning and some of the content creation as well as personalization, we're also seeing right now, and a few client examples that even come to my mind, is inserting AI in a way that allows you to create a digital workforce or digital labor. And what I mean by that is, aside from what many of you may think when you think about generative AI or ChatGPT, kind of an ask me anything type tool, what we're also seeing AI in a digital worker format is really being a side of desk utility where we can take a discrete function, whether it's within the HR function, a recruiter or somebody in the learning space, and being able to create a worker on the side of their desk that, and I'll go into recruiting for a second, if there's a massive amount of manual work that still needs to happen, whether it's in requisition creation or whether it's in matching talent against the requirements of a role, we're able to see that packaged and almost compartmentalized into a side of desk utility for an individual. So I think what many of you will see moving forward, whether it's embedded into your products or embedded into your services, is how can I make and enhance an individual's contribution to an organization? We want to make sure they have massive impact. And by standing up AI in a manner that has that side of desk, that digital worker accompanying them on a day-to-day, they're more simply and they're really more effective at being able to move work kind of through that cycle or that spectrum. And then when we think about just overall AI in the HCM space, we're seeing these trends steadily increase. And so many of you that are ingesting this or even embedding it into your tools, you're seeing a lot of AI-powered talent suites. You're also seeing a lot of examples that Jamaal is going to cover a little bit on HR analytics and workforce productivity. And so the main point that I wanted to make through these examples is, whether it's learning, I know I hit on that a little bit, whether it's workforce management that Jamaal talked about, I do think digital labor is one of those trends that you will see in the forefront and continue to see advances on and accelerating as we move through the next 6 months, 9 months, and a year. But Jamaal, what I'll do is, do you want to talk to us a little bit more about worker productivity specifically?
Yeah, I'll talk about a few things. So one is we're seeing an uptick in leveraging this technology. Very common use cases around chatbots and virtual assistants. So whether that be to facilitate the onboarding process and answer employee questions quickly with the right tonality and the right content, and to do so, by not necessarily being explicitly programmed with a series of questions and answers, but actually leveraging some of the natural language capabilities to perform these functions. That's incredible. In payroll and benefits, what gets exciting to me is the ability for these chatbots and virtual assistants to look at both unstructured and structured data. So I can answer basic questions about payroll and benefits policies, but then I can also get into the individual's record and understand, like how much, if I transitioned to a new organization mid-year and I had 401k contributions at my previous organization and some at my new, how much more can I contribute before I top out on my 401k contributions, and at what percentage of my paycheck do I need to contribute to do that, right? Like that's a pretty sophisticated question, but the art of the possible here is to be able to bring together that structured and unstructured data into these models and give it access to it in a way that allows it to answer those types of questions. Worker productivity is huge, right? And we've seen tremendous investments from major players in and around this space to advance what's possible here. But when we talk about things like content generation, so first drafts of emails, communications, when we talk about ideation, so I need to go into an interview for a candidate for a particular type of position. What are 10 questions that I can ask? And especially related to managerial skills and sort of some of that foundational ideation, creating job descriptions, removing bias, making sure it's the tonality in our communications reflect the tonality of the organization and the tenets that we want to keep front and center. And then also, interestingly, more coaching, right? So I draft a communication and I ask these tools, what could I do to improve this communication, and getting some of that coaching based upon, the art of the possible and how I could communicate really facilitates improvement and worker productivity. Steve also mentioned predictive modeling, and Yves as well. There are very traditional examples like continuing to leverage traditional techniques to develop predictive models around attrition. This continues to be a topic that clients come back to, and these models, once done, are not done in the larger scheme of things, right? They need to be maintained over time, and they need to be made current to ensure that they're still predictive in nature based upon the data that they're consuming and its reliability. And then the final thing that I'll mention related to this, I think there's excitement and trepidation around bias and risks around the technology. We've seen examples or heard of them in the news of organizations who have trained these models on historic data on what makes a hire successful in a given role. And because that foundational data was skewed towards a particular segment of the employee population, it perpetuated a bias that they may not have been aware, right? It's absolutely critical that we are conscious of as we develop and release these models, because on the flip side, the tools, when appropriately used, have the ability to help us to understand bias that we may not even be aware of, and to appropriately adjust for those biases. And that's the art of the possible. So that's what I'd add to what you said, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. Let me jump in there. So, I mean, you touched on what I believe is probably a third rail, live wire for a lot of clients, that the opportunity in front of them is undeniable. The application and impact on the organization is very clear, but not at the same scale. But I personally, when I get an iPhone update, I view that with some skepticism and hesitation, and that's just updating software on my phone. I have to imagine the prospect of rolling something like this out, regardless of where it hits within the organization, is an extremely daunting prospect for a lot of businesses, even those that are more tech leaning or even software focused, who are naturally inclined to be a little bit more on the leaning edge of this sort of thing. But maybe Steve and Jamaal, if you wouldn't mind, the last few minutes, just talk through a few lessons. And Jamaal, you mentioned a few of them, but few lessons you guys have seen or you had clients learn as they've kind of gone through this process, and then maybe the kind of risks and challenges that you're also seeing clients experience as they continue to push through into this new frontier.
Perfect. Thanks, Don. One of the biggest lessons that we've seen learned so far is in and around the relationship between having a corporate strategy on how you want to approach and tackle implementing AI. And again, whether it's more of a traditional steering it towards back office or putting it into the product itself, or even from a go-to-market standpoint, these are all different areas in which parts and portions of the organization, I'll call them towers for the purpose of this, right, are all running full speed ahead. But where I'm seeing a lot of clients struggle right now is in the alignment of what these towers in an organization are doing versus where it fits into the overall enterprise strategy. And so it sounds simple, a little bit more difficult in execution, but making sure that you have that overall strategy and then what you're doing as an organization, irrespective of if it's internally focused or go-to-market focused, or even embedded in the product as a go-to-market itself, being able to make sure that everyone's operating in tandem, and it's happening at a very quick pace, but it needs to be in lockstep with the overall strategy of the organization. And that leads to less conflicts down the road. And it also makes sure that there aren't any questions around what's the return on the investment expected. And so that's one of the areas, just making sure that alignment is in place between the overall strategy of the organization and the parts of it where you're looking to implement it. But another area too that I'll hit on is around readiness. You heard a lot of I'll call them buzzwords, but they're more than buzzwords. They're critical to implementing generative AI is around data and around language models, whether the data is structured or unstructured in nature. One of the biggest things that we're seeing clients struggle with now is jumping right away into an AI solution, but not yet having a solid foundation from a data standpoint. And those two are critical. And I would say that the implementation and the move forward with generative AI is only ever going to be as good as the data structure and the data governance sitting underneath it. And so one of the things that we look for our organizations to do is have a cohesive strategy on how are we going to structure the data? How is it going to be compartmentalized? How do our language models interact with it? Those are all the critical conversations that should be happening upfront rather than getting to a juncture in any type of a project to implement this to avoid misalignment. And similar to those 2 points, governance is another big topic on this. Is even after you have that strategy, you have the alignment, you have expectations set throughout the organization, how are you going to govern it from a point of starting on it to actually finalizing, continuing to iterate, making sure that, again, back to expectations, the direction the organization wants to go is in line with everything that they're doing. A governance structure is really critical. And when I say the proper governance structure, I'm referring to top down, intersecting through all of the areas in the organization which are moving forward with efforts. So those are just a few examples. And what we often find is that there's a little bit of paralysis by analysis that goes on, whereas organizations almost want to solve for everything in the enterprise prior to actually getting started. There is a happy medium there. And Jamaal's going to talk a little bit in a moment about kind of a big bang approach versus more compartmentalized or iterative ways. I'll use agile as an example of saying, once we have that governance structure set, once we have that data model and set, what are some of the ways that we can move forward in an iterative manner that still give real-time value drops to the organization? And so, Jamaal, I'll turn it over to you a little bit to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with everything you said, Steve. So there's not necessarily a need to go so big all at once. So while it may be tempting to try to do all these use cases simultaneously, it's essential to have that foundational approach to understand associated costs, highest value investments, to really work through prioritized use cases, understand risks, and understand readiness across the various factors that you mentioned, Steve, including organizational readiness. How ready are we from a talent perspective, from a culture perspective, to do these things? I agree. I would use the word agile as well. So adopting an agile mindset and taking incremental steps in AI adoption can prove to be beneficial. It can reduce the risk, be more cost efficient, and allows for room for learning and adjustments during that process. And so what I'm seeing a lot of organizations do is focus on sort of that overall, as you mentioned, cross-business unit, cross-function, legal, risk, compliance, security, IT, HR, sort of foundation, right? And then identifying a series of use cases, whether that's leveraging technology that has it embedded in the technology to advance those use cases in the context of the workflow and the work processes, or it's developing something new, a proof of concept that has high impact. And you mentioned some of the opportunities in the learning space as an example of what you might consider POCing, because it can take a lot of that work out or enhance the quality, or we're just seeing that our workforce is exerting so much effort in this space, and we want to improve that experience that they have so they can focus on higher value tasks, right? So that's what I would add to what you mentioned in terms of lessons learned, and then I would just maybe end with this point. You probably can tell from everything that we've covered, the pace of technological advancement is rapidly accelerating, reshaping how businesses operate, and AI is playing a major role here. So organizations that are slow to adapt or choose not to utilize AI and related technologies are, they're experiencing that risk of being left behind by their more agile, innovative competitors that are willing to take steps into this space to start to think through all the things that we've mentioned, to start to execute proof of concepts so that they have an intentional and thoughtful approach to responsibly deploying AI to address the opportunities in the marketplace. The reality is this technology continues to be on an evolutionary journey, and so we've got to meet it where it is. And that still means that you've seen, hopefully, and heard, there's some real meaningful value that can be derived today and foundations that you can put in place to help you to continue to benefit from investments in the space down the road. So I would close with those final points.
Got it. No, thank you for that. Yves, maybe just last minute here. Obviously, you sit kind of at a higher level in terms of your perspective of the AI universe here. Maybe just a couple of learnings that you've seen along the way, given your perspective.
No, definitely. I think honestly, I'm mostly going to pile on what Stephen and Jamaal said. Data is extremely important, alignment, continuous governance, but potentially more than anything else, really agile, iterative approach. It's really, AI covers a range of technology, and the main risk I see is basically that it can be hard when you're not an expert to understand actually what's doable and easy to do today with AI and what is a really, really difficult task, right? As we see AI winning at games like Go and StarCraft and finding molecules and generating really impressive, videos and answering questions. Yet it doesn't mean AI is good at everything, right? Like, self-driving cars have been announced for, a very long time. They're not here. Robotics is still a really, really hard problem. Hallucination when it comes to ChatGPT and chatbots is an open-ended problem. It's an open problem today. So I think it's really about this agile iterative approach, working with experts and really trying to identify opportunities where AI as it exists today is going to be, very good and will bring value. I agree. I think there are a lot of opportunities, a lot of values, and it's a question of really aligning what AI can do today with the opportunities.
Excellent. Well, look, this has certainly been an incredible conversation. I think we've probably contextualized a fair amount of content here in a relatively short period of time, but I think ultimately the takeaway here is that AI is undoubtedly here and will remain and will continue to evolve the HCM landscape. But firstly, again, on behalf of Baird, thank you to the three of you. Really appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us. It was a real pleasure to have you share your insights on this critical topic. But thank you again on behalf of Baird to our panelists, and thank you to our viewers. Please reach out if you have anything that you'd like to chat about on this webinar. I look forward to chatting again. Thank you.